Hi, AP students. We are getting into our talk for the beginning of Unit 2 today. That has to do with measuring the economy, and which for what we're worried about is really going to be looking at some statistics, how those statistics get affected by certain things that we'll get into the future. But this unit really focuses on those statistics. So the notes that you'll be filling out today they look like this. So you're on part one, okay, of the notes, and as you'll see as we go through, we're going to talk about what recessions are in these business cycles first, and then this video is going to cover inflation. And so as you get into the inflation stuff, you'll see that in green on the notes, okay, is going to match a section of the notes that you would have printed off or that you're filling out. So green special terms, they're going to go in order from left to right, but the green special terms, and then you'll write what's in red, okay, to kind of simplify some things for you when we get to that particular point. So anyway, let's get rolling here in terms of what we're going to be covering. Okay, so the reason we use these statistics is we're going to try to analyze what's going on in what's referred to as the business cycle. The business cycle is really best defined as, is the economy doing good or bad? And the economy is very similar to like a person, right? It does well when it's doing well, you feel good. You're healthy, you're moving fast, you feel like doing stuff, starting businesses maybe. And when it's not so healthy, you kind of want to lay around in bed. You're not very productive. You don't really feel like going and spending any money anywhere. And for obviously in an entire business or an entire business model situation, that would mean less economic growth. Okay, as we eventually get to that. All right, so we're going to look at three main stats. We're going to look at GDP, unemployment, and inflation. Today, in this video, will cover inflation as we get to that point. Now, the four stages of the business cycle are expansion, peaks, contractions, and troughs. Okay, you can know those terms if you want. Really, kind of easier remembered is growth getting better. Okay, contractions getting worse. Okay, sometimes we call expansions recoveries. Sometimes we call contractions recessions. Okay, probably more commonly we call it recessions. All right, so that means our economy is getting smaller, and again, which at the end of the day means we're going to be producing less, which means people are making less money. Expansion is going to be the opposite. We're going to be producing more. We're going to be earning more money. Okay, so as you can see, also we'll kind of talk about standards of living a little bit later on. As our economy grows, it seems that we can provide more stuff for people. It seems that people are going to have better lives, easier lives, on average. Okay, a lot of times that's referred to as a standard of living. Okay, increasing your standard of living. As you can see, it happens kind of in waves here. All right, this particular picture has it kind of very symmetrical that the good periods and the bad periods, the growth and recessions are kind of the same length. In reality, that is not necessarily the case. Okay, so this is a graph of our unemployment rate, and you can see, I have it up to date here through early 2021, you can see that the unemployment rate kind of peaks at different times. Now, remember, this is the worst time. Okay, so this is a period of decline here. Okay, so this would kind of be determined as the trough. It's kind of backwards because it's unemployment, right? So unemployment's bad. So you can see that the unemployment is bad or gets its worst at different times. So we can't say, well, you know what? Once unemployment hits 10%, it's going to start getting better. We can't really say that. Okay. You can also see that, when it's the best or the lowest, that changes too. Okay. And, wherever that is, we can't say, well, you know what? Unemployment's down to 3.5%. Like it's going to start getting worse here. Okay. We can't necessarily say that. Also, the periods of growth, okay, between these gray bars, they vary in length also. Okay, so the length of growth, the time of growth is going to vary as well. These gray bars, they represent recessions, periods of decline. We don't necessarily know how long those will last either. So we can't say, well, we've been in a period of decline for, 10 months now, it's going to get better. It's not really how it works. Okay, so they're unpredictable. And again, usually very similar to how, your body operates. you get really sick really fast, and then it takes you a little bit longer to recuperate. Same thing, we're like to be healthy for a long period of time, then we're kind of really sick for a short period of time, especially if you ever had the flu. Like that's a bad 2 days, right, or 3 days, or whatever that case may be. And then afterwards, it takes kind of a long time for you to heal and feel back to normal. Maybe a week, right, in your particular case, but obviously the economy's time periods are a little bit different. Okay, so know that these are irregular. They're pretty difficult to predict. I mean, if they're going to determine, and they haven't made that decision yet, if they're going to determine that COVID caused a recession, I mean, well, who could have predicted that was going to occur? To end this period of growth from 2009 till 2020, right? Who would have been able to predict that it was going to be a pandemic that was going to occur, right? Those are hard to predict. So just like with you, it's hard to predict when you're going to be sick. Sometimes we can get some information, like for example, like if you get allergies, well, every spring, your allergies act up. So sometimes, we can use some indicators to help us predict what's going on, to try to get out in front of things. And the reason why we want to do that, well, if you're a private individual, investing in the stock market can be extremely, if you can pick exactly when the market's at the bottom, right? You can buy. If you can predict when the market's at the top, you can sell. So you can make it beneficial for you to do that. On top of that too, when the economy's doing bad, we usually don't want to start new businesses. We don't want to borrow necessarily. We may not be able to borrow a ton of money necessarily, based on our personal income and situation. So there are some reasons why we do want to predict that. Those standards of living, those things that make our life a little bit easier, are listed there for you. Let me make sure I know where you guys are writing these down, okay, as you're kind of going through. Okay, so you're on your examples of high standards of living. Throw those in there, as we're going here. Okay, so we can list a number of those things. A lot of those things in the United States are probably taken for granted. The United States has an extremely high standard of living compared to a lot of countries. So they're the things that make America, for lack of a better term, a better place to live than other places. Not to say that it's the best all the time, but those things that are readily available for people in those cases. Okay, so these recessions, we've kind of gotten into it a little bit. Obviously, you could kind of add like COVID to this, right? That gives us a firsthand. That kind of gives us a firsthand realization of some things that cause some economic instability. Okay, so this idea of, hey, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the next week or month or 6 months, so I'm going to save my money. I'm going to not spend it. Well, if I'm not spending my money, remember, that's not creating an income for other people. Okay, so there's some causes of recessions. The book's going to put a few different things out there. Just know that whatever's going to cause instability, okay, or a lack of like knowing what's going to go on, that can cause a recession. Okay, so the things that happen during these recessions are, the things that, going out to eat, right, or buying a brand new car or buying a house, even in some cases, these capital goods, as they'll be called, or durable goods, that we might buy when something goes bad, a car, a washing machine. Well, we're going to repair those instead of replace them in some cases. And so, we're going to try to save money. At the end of the day, during a recession, we're going to try to save money. So, whatever's causing it, however we can save money, we're going to do it. You can kind of see that necessities are hurt less. There was a big recession back in 2009. Gasoline prices went up to about $4.20 a gallon. That caused some instability, right? It's because I had to buy gasoline to be able to get to work. Well, I'm going to save money on some other things during that time, so I can obviously keep my job. Okay, so those are the general impacts. I think most of them are pretty obvious in terms of what happens when people aren't spending money or don't have money to spend. Okay, just a quick review. Remember, money flows through the economy from us, right? So we create businesses. We also create labor. We also supply labor for businesses. That's how money flows through the economy. We go and spend it other places. Pretty straightforward. We talked about the government being in the middle here. They can affect how much money we have to spend. That's a little bit of a different chapter. We won't get too far into that. But this circular flow model represents how money flows through the economy. Obviously, we don't have the government as a part of it there. Okay, so moving on to inflation, take a quick second and kind of do these inflation rates here and kind of just get a quick review as far as how inflation is figured. Okay, so I'm just going to go through real quick. I'm going to show you how I do it. I just take the change in price divided by the original price. Excuse my handwriting there. Okay, so for number one, you got 7 divided by 100. Oh yeah, then we got to multiply by 100 as well. divided by 100 times 100 equals 7%. 3 divided by 50 is 6%. And again, if you're having trouble with percentages, you got to get a hold of me. 2 divided by 37, should have made my math easier. That's going to be, well, 2 divided by 37. I don't have my calculator. Skip it. Put that math in there. The last one I want to mention, though, is we have a negative change right there. Okay, so negative 9 divided by 74. Okay, so negative 9 divided by 74 is going to give us a negative number. That number is 12.2%. So equals negative 12.2%. So we do have times when prices go down. 2 divided by 37 is 5.4. Okay, excuse my handwriting there. It's obviously pretty sloppy. Okay, so some things that cause inflation. We're going to get into that. We're going to roll here through this. Keep in mind the reason, just as we go through, inflation is bad because if I don't get a raise and I make the same amount of money, okay, from 1 week or 1 year to the next, and prices go up, well, I am unable to buy as much stuff. Okay, so we'll give you some definitions for that and some formulas for that as we move forward. So, a couple special terms. I'll let you copy these down. You might hear these sometimes. This creeping inflation. A lot of times we say inflation's bad. In fact, it's actually pretty normal in the U.S. On average, since 1914, we're at about 3.4%. So, anyway, it's a normal thing, but we want to be able to predict it and expect it. Okay, we don't want inflation to happen really fast. We don't want what you'll eventually see is prices go down either. You've heard the term, if you've taken U.S. history of hyperinflation. Germany experienced it in the 1920s and 30s. Disinflation is when inflation has decreased. Okay, so I have year A at 3%, year B at 2.1%. We're going to refer to that as disinflation. Okay, so prices not increasing as fast as they did the year before. And then your deflation is going to be when prices go down, okay, or give us a negative value there. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You'll want to know those terms if you see those. But we're going to talk more about kind of what causes inflation and some things that it means for people. So our inflation rate here is going to be this red line, and you can kind of see we haven't talked about unemployment yet, and we'll reference it later. You can see that when inflation is good, so to speak, meaning going down, you can see unemployment usually increases a little bit. So there's an inverse relationship of inflation versus unemployment. Again, you can see during a recession here, prices go down, unemployment goes up. You can even see here at the beginning of COVID, prices going down, unemployment going up. And so really what that represents is, remember, inflation is going to be influenced by demand, okay? And if no one has jobs, no one has income, meaning that income decreases, that's going to lead to a decrease in demand, right? And when we decrease our demand for whatever, prices go down. Should be reviewed from last chapter. All right. We kind of gave you a quick insight on how inflation is figured out. If you're a formula person, okay, you might see something like this. All right, where X is your year. Okay. Again, this is your price change. This is divided by the original price, right? They just kind of get kind of fancy with how they type things in there. And again, we'll talk about the CPI here in a second, but it's just the percentage increase in the price level. All right, so we practice that. If you're having trouble with it, make sure you reach out. We'll get you pointed in the right direction. Now, the one thing about the United States inflation rate is we don't want to look at necessarily every single price increase that is available. So, like, for example, we don't want to include things that not necessarily everybody is able to buy. So, like the price of yachts or airplanes or even like fancy sports cars. Okay, we want to look at things that basically every person are going to be in the market for. So things like gasoline, just general run of the mill new cars from like Ford or Chevrolet, right? Toyotas, like domestic type cars. Okay, we're going to look at food. We're going to look at any number of different things. But even within food, we may not include things like caviar, okay? But things like steak and chicken, things that people are always eating, are going to be included, okay? So somebody spends a whole lot of time. There's like 300 general goods and services included in the consumer price index. We don't have to have those memorized. Know that again, they're basic goods, not these extraordinarily luxurious goods, okay, that we kind of mentioned. There's two types of things that we'll eventually look at, okay? And again, how these are going to relate is we have our nominal income and we have our real income. Okay, so our nominal income is not going to be adjusted for inflation. We'll talk about that formula a little bit later. Okay, so our nominal income is just going to be how much money do I make per year. Okay, well our real income is we're going to adjust that for inflation. We'll be able to show you how to do that here in a little bit. All right. Now, our consumer price index, okay, this would show us our inflation right here, right here, because this is, okay, the the percent change from one year to the next. Okay, so know what we're looking at. Now, when we look at this graph, okay, this is just our inflation rate. We can see when the economy is doing good or bad. Okay, so usually when the economy is doing poorly, we're going to see prices go down, as we mentioned. Now, there are some cases where prices increase during recessions. There's some things that there's some significant problems that causes in terms of for the economy. There's a term called high inflation, high unemployment is going to be referred to as stagflation. That's a different chapter. Okay, but again, like I said, you can see that prices generally go down during recessions. Now, if we were just to look at the consumer price index, and again, this consumer price index it basically increases over time, and that it just shows. It started with $10, and it kind of went forward through recent time to give us, I think it's up to like $260 right now. I'll show you a chart here in a second. But you can see that, over time, you can't really see when the economy is doing good or bad because it's just constantly increasing, right? This inflation's kind of already always been there. You can see kind of some special spots here where, you can kind of see that prices went down a little bit, but it's kind of hard to define where these recessions are if we just look at those prices. Give me a quick second here. I'll pull up the website and I'll show you what the CPI looks like. Okay, back with you here. So just to kind of be able to give you a visual of what the CPI looks like, again, they're going to take that basket of goods, sometimes it's referred to, and they're going to apply the price changes to it. And again, like I said, they started back in 1914 with $10. They've applied it over and over and over and over and over again till, most recently, obviously in December of 2020. And that's going to say, well, what you could buy with $10 in 1914, it cost you $260.47 today. Okay, so it gives you that dollar amount. Sometimes we think about things, differently. Like when we talk about, and here's the advantage of kind of using consumer price indexes. It's easier to say, hey, you know what? Gas prices went up by 40 cents yesterday. We don't usually say, hey, gas prices increased by, 20% yesterday. That's not how we talk, right? That's not how our brains work. But that percentage we can also apply to, looking at things from a bigger picture and say, okay, how much worse is it really than just saying, 20 cents on a day-to-day basis. So there's different ways you can utilize both of those things. They do try to weight the consumer price index into, some accuracy. Okay. And again, not anything that we need to have memorized, but the general amount of money you spend on these certain things, they're going to try to make it so it's accurate. They're not just going to throw everything into a lump sum. They're going to try to weight some things. Okay, so we'll get some practice with how they do that as we kind of move forward, getting into GDP and stuff. But know that they do some things to make their stats as accurate as possible. Um, So some things that cause it. Well, we've got the demand side. Obviously, you draw a supply and demand graph, right? You've got the demand curve and you've got the supply curve. Well, we can decrease our supply, that makes price go up, or we can increase our demand, that makes price go up. So you've got the demand side and the supply side. Okay, on the demand side, we're going to call demand pull. Okay, on the cost side, we're going to call it a cost push. Okay, so we'll throw those terms around as we move forward. The wage price spiral refers to as we increase wages. Okay, that's going to decrease our supply, raising wages and we're raising prices, sorry. And then eventually, like, I make more money since I'm making more wages and the demand starts moving back the other way too. So it kind of creates that combo of making prices go up. Some reasons it's not perfect. Obviously, like when we're looking at the health of an economy, people get creative and they can substitute things. So I'm going to eat chicken instead of steak. I'm going to ride my bike instead of, buy a new car. I'm going to carpool instead of have to pay for high gas prices. We can do, we can substitute things. We can buy in bulk. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what becomes necessities. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, especially, cell phones were not a necessity. They're all but a necessity now. And on top of that, too, the home phone, the house phone, probably not as much of a necessity. And so, you know, figuring out what to include in these things can sometimes lead to some inaccuracies too. Quality leads to cheaper products over time. So again, another thing that lasts a little bit longer. Again, just some things that lead to a few inaccuracies. Bottom line is, we've kind of mentioned as we've gone through it, we can't buy as much, okay, if our income stays the same. This really hurts people on fixed incomes, people that receive government payments, okay, so whether it's for, a welfare program due to low income situations, or disability situations, whether it means Social Security, it's going to hit those people the hardest because, again, it's hard for them to go and earn more money, right? It also leads to higher interest rates from banks, meaning I'm able to borrow less money, which leads to the price of homes going down. That's another chapter. And again, at the end of the day, if we can't keep track of, if we have prices changing all the time, it's going to lead to some loss of efficiency. So if I think the prices are going to go up tomorrow, I'm going to lead to spending money today. If I think prices are going to go down tomorrow, I'm going to hold on to my money today. Again, the general efficiency of spending money that people get used to, that basically that can disappear if inflation is super unstable. All right. So the last thing here that we'll mention is, and you'll have to finish this either in your specifics if you have room, or write it down at the bottom of your page. Okay, is the interest rate. Okay, and we can also is the interest rate that you borrow money from banks, and we'll come back to this later on. We can also use this with our wages. Okay, so here's your formulas. All right. It's the same formula, obviously, with just, a little bit of algebra, flipping some variables around. Um, but again, we're going to assume in this case that people get a raise with the rate of inflation. All right. In these cases. And again, we have an economy experiencing inflation of 5%. So that's my inflation rate. I'm going to use this real interest rate here. So I'm just going to put an R for real interest equals nominal interest is going to be 7% minus 5% equals the real interest rate is 2% that you would borrow money at. Again, assuming that you are getting a raise through that time. Okay, so you could also do this with your real income. Okay, so you've got your nominal interest, so you've got your inflation rate being, let's just say, your inflation rate is, I don't know, 5%, whatever. Okay, and then your real income is going to be your nominal raise, right? So that might be 3%, right? You get a 3% raise. So your nominal raise, your nominal income is now going to be your real income is -2%, your real income or your real raise, so to speak. Okay, as you kind of look at that. So there's a couple different ways that you can kind of see how much more money you're making. We'll get some practice with it as we move forward. So appreciate you listening today. Moving on, next section is unemployment followed by GDP, and we're rolling through this stuff. It's a little quicker than last time.